In Ukraine, a police officer recovered a dog from the wreckage. You will cry when you see his owner's face when they are reunited. Welcome to USA Stories channel. Do not forget to subscribe and activate the bell button to receive all new updates. Now let's go to the story. Before everything that transpired, people in Ukraine were going about their daily lives. They were living their lives, not thinking that anything terrible would occur. They had no idea that adopting a new animal would turn out to be a mistake. In the Ukrainian Donetsk area, in the village of Mykolaiivka, lived a single guy, a 77-year-old grandpa. His beloved family dog, who had been with him for many years, had lately passed away, and he had recently lost his wife. The man was incredibly lonely and heartbroken. Due to their jobs and domestic duties, his children, who were all living in distant cities and towns, were unable to spend as much time with their dad as they would have liked. They devised a scheme for this reason. When one of his sons and his family paid the elderly guy a visit one day, they brought with them something very special. A small black and white puppy that was going to be the man's new best buddy. The elderly man was ecstatic and really appreciative of the kind present. Having another pet to look after would perhaps bring him the daily companionship and affection he needed, something his family was unable to offer him. Having lived with animals his whole life, the man was in his late 70s, but he was still very robust and could easily care for a new puppy. And he actually did that. Along with giving him all of his attention, he toilet trained him and took him for walks. The father found great solace in his small dog when the war broke out only a few weeks after they became inseparable. He may not have accepted a new puppy if he had understood how things would work out, but everything occurred so quickly that he was left with little choice but to raise the dog as best he could under the given circumstances. The man's children wanted him to move in with them, but he was unable to leave the city since all the trains and other public transportation were packed. In addition to being concerned for his family, he didn't want to leave the house where he had reared them all and had shared many pleasant years of life with his late wife. In all honesty, he didn't think the conflict would have as much of an impact on him as it would. He lived in a little town and wasn't in the military, so there shouldn't have been any cause for concern. He pledged that he would return as quickly as possible to join his family, some of whom had left the nation to live in the major cities that had been assaulted first. Even reaching some of the other kids would be difficult at that time because they lived farther away, where things were still somewhat secure. The traffic was becoming worse. Public transportation was congested and unreliable. The grandpa concluded that staying in his house would be the safest option for both him and his pet. There hadn't even been a need for them to seek cover, and the surroundings seemed peaceful. Furthermore, he had no intention of parting from his puppy, unlike some others who were compelled to do so with their animals. The man carried on with his daily activities, playing with his puppy, visiting neighbors, and growing vegetables in his garden. Apart from his incessant concern for his kids, not much changed in his life. At least, not over there. In other regions of the nation, circumstances had quickly shifted. Although many believed that they were in danger, the Ukrainian police force was essential to protecting the nation's population. Rather than maintaining law and order, their priorities appeared to have shifted. Their main goal was to instill optimism in everyone around them. They assisted in the evacuation of those they could, and they assisted those who were unable to go in finding safer places to live, such as shelters. The cops had come to represent some of the kind and wonderful things that were taking place around the nation. They took fresh bread and supplies to areas where food was becoming scarce and distributed them to those in need. Even youngsters who had to escape without their own toys, or who had lost their belongings due to bombings or raids, received presents from them. The police were reaching out to everyone they could, and before long, they would be the elderly man's sole remaining chance. In the community, the day was typical. The guy and the dog had gone for a stroll earlier, and they had made stops along the route to visit with some of their acquaintances. They returned and irrigated their garden after that. Nothing unusual was happening, and everything appeared to be extremely straightforward and uncomplicated. While the dog ran around the house playing with his toys, the guy was watching television. Subsequently, the structure trembled with tremendous booming sounds. Their house was being bombarded with bombs. The elderly guy ran into the home, avoiding the door, because his first priority was to get to his pet. But all of a sudden, he felt an explosion nearby and a portion of his house vanished. He didn't even know if his puppy was still alive or where he was. He had to escape, or he would not be able to survive. Although leaving the puppy crushed his heart, he had no choice but to find refuge. He exited the home and fled at a distance. The bombardment stopped as abruptly as it had started, leaving the community in ruins, and everyone who had managed to escape started to look for loved ones. Others made an effort to salvage everything they could from the wreckage. The Ukrainian police were called upon to assist since rescue services were at capacity. They made every effort to ensure the elderly man was uninjured when they discovered him staring at the debris that had previously been his house in astonishment. He persisted in imploring them to locate his pet. Despite the fact that it seemed doubtful that they would discover a tiny puppy among the wreckage, they decided to do all in their power to save the elderly man because they believed that all lives were precious. As long as the elderly man stayed back and refrained from trying to search himself, they would search, they vowed. In the debris, he might get severe injuries, and they did not want that to happen. The elderly man found it quite difficult to wait for the police to discover something, but he had no choice. The workers searched the area where the man had last seen his dog by digging through some of the wreckage, but they were unsuccessful in finding anything. They thought it was time to give up after a while. Abruptly, they perceived a faint squeak emanating from beneath them. The men all grabbed gloves and got to work digging. They needed to lift heavy boulders and rubble. The idea that anything could be living beneath all of this was astounding. After what seemed like an eternity, they managed to free the dog from the debris. He was out of breath, and his black fur had become entirely brown. They dressed him and cuddled him. He was terrified and shivering. Despite going through a horrific trauma, the unfortunate puppy was still alive. As they attended to him, he began to relax and breathe more easily. Though they were not specialists, it appeared that the puppy would fare well. They could now inform his owner, who was eager to hear good news and was waiting impatiently. Before bringing the dog to him, the men, including the cameraman, took a few seconds to give the little puppy some head scratches. However, it was the owner's response that nearly made them collapse to the ground. You'll be crying after seeing his response. Upon seeing his owner, the puppy's little tail began to wag. The owner, who is 77 years old, was ecstatic to find his closest buddy still alive. Though he secretly thought it was doubtful that he would get to hug the puppy again, he had hoped that he was still alive. He must have felt a flood of relief sweep over him. He could not stop praising the cops for finding him and his dog after searching for so long. All of his belongings were gone, but it didn't matter anymore. The one thing that did, he had discovered: his puppy. They might not be together forever, but at least they had each other. I appreciate you reading. Do you know of any other touching tales of a reunion that occurred during the war? Come back soon for many more amazing tales. Please remember to subscribe to our channel, give us a thumbs up, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our videos. If you enjoyed the tale, the next video that plays on your screen will probably move you too.